Okay, welcome back. Hello. I have completed my final day at the Secret Magic Money Conference, and it was great. It was very great. There's another day tomorrow, but honestly, I'm a little bit fried in the head as a result of pretty much everything that went over my head. It seemed to strike lightning down on my head as it went over my head and kind of zapped my brain cells. But I learned a lot, and I had great conversations with a great many people. All of you will remain anonymous, and that's just as you would like it. Although, I think one of the funniest parts about the conference was when the Darkfi guy, he got on stage with the NYM guy, and I'll talk about the NYM presentation later. That was, I think, my favorite, probably because I could actually understand what he was talking about. But he gets on stage and he starts like doing selfies with everybody in the back. He's like, everybody smile. And like literally the number one rule to MoneroKon is you don't take pictures. So like he gets up on stage and like he gets everybody in this selfie and everyone's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Everyone's like, stop. But I thought that was really funny. So shouts out to Amir, shouts out to the Darkfi bros, and I guess shouts out to the NYM people and everybody else who, had their OPSECs exposed in the picture. So if you'll notice, I'm a little bit tired. My eyes are bloody red as a result of probably too much coffee, to be honest with you. I don't even feel that tired, but I know that I'm tweaking off this European coffee. Dude, so I looked at the Burger King menu. I didn't go to Burger King today, but I was just kind of like tempted to have some familiarity in my food. And I saw that, like I said that in a prior video, coffee is in literally everything. But like even the shakes have coffee in it. They have espresso milkshakes at Burger King. The American mind cannot comprehend this. And then you also have affogato, I think is how you call it at Burger King. So, and affogato is like espresso mixed with ice cream. So like literally people are selling ice cream or espresso and coffee until like it never stops being sold here in Europe. You just have cafes remaining open through the evening and people just waltz in, they get their 5th or 6th shots of espresso for the day at like 8 o'clock at night. I don't quite understand this world, but I'm being affected by it, obviously. But let's talk about some of the presentations, and let's talk about some of the things that I've learned. And I think what I've learned more than anything is just sell all your Monero. It's over. You're never going to understand this stuff. Your OPSEC is exposed. Chain analysis is tracking your metadata, which you probably didn't even know. And they know everything you've been doing with your crypto, and you're cooked, dude. It's over. Just sell it all, go into cash. I literally told somebody that today. I was like, I'm a little bit freaked out by what I've learned with the network lack of anonymity, even with Monero, if you're not using VPNs and you're not using things properly. And, the ability for these spy nodes and for these chain analysis companies to link metadata with certain transactions that you may or may not do, especially if you're participating in KYC stuff, which I know like you shouldn't do, but, otherwise you're going to get into this stuff, by using Havana or using some other kind of thing that most people are just not familiar with. And then just, I'm not trying to complain, but it really is kind of wild how much I didn't know about this network security anonymity problem. And this is the cutting edge issue, I think, right now in the space. And I finally just threw up my hands at the end of the day, and I'm like, I think I'm just going to hypothetically sell everything I hypothetically own and go into cash and maybe just ride it out that way. But of course, we don't want to be in fiat, because one of the reasons we're not in fiat is because they're printing the crap out of it, and it's just going to, plunge into the abyss of nothingness. So it's like, okay, well, what do? You just go into gold and silver, and you like ditch the grid and you ditch the digital world. You can't do that. You have to participate in the digital world somehow. And that means having digital money, and ideally digital money that isn't inflating into oblivion. And so knowing all this, I've come to appreciate more what people like Seth for Privacy do. I'm not a Bitcoin guy. I told people that today. I ran into some people who are indeed Monero bros, but we're also Bitcoin bros too, and they had their reasons. But like, I do appreciate that kind of evangelism going out into that world now, because I can't imagine people using Bitcoin and transparent cryptos not knowing about network security and anonymity, and just how dangerous it is for people's financial data to be on these blockchains where people can look up the addresses, people can look at everything that happens before and after they find out your address, link it with your metadata, link it with your IP, figure out where you live, who you are, and just like, dude, this is a problem. So I'm glad that there are people out there doing that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm also glad to be learning about this. And we need to obviously make this a much bigger deal. And I'm glad for people like Harry Halpin from NYM to be making a bigger deal about this with his own work at NYM VPN. And we'll get into that here shortly. But the first presentation I went to today was from A Fungible, who I'm glad to say has become somewhat of a friend of mine, really good guy. We had some good conversations today. But he was the stress tester back in 2022 when like transactions were spiking. A lot of you may remember when that happened, and people were having trouble sending transactions, through some of these wallets, because the default fee was the lowest fee that you would pay, instead of the most recommended fee, which some of these wallets implemented after the fact, because people could not send their transactions because of the bloat in the blocks as a result of the spam that was happening as a result of his stress test, which nobody knew was him at the time. People thought it was like a nation state, or somebody thought it was like exchange or like the government or something like that. But it actually was like one of our own bros. Can you believe it? And he was like almost not wanting to participate or like talk to people in the community for a while, because he's just like, I'm going to be crucified if I tell people I'm the one who did this. But actually everybody was very glad that he did, and it allowed for wallets to make improvements and for other improvements to happen, for us to kind of figure out what would happen should a nation state decide to stress test the Monero network by doing a bunch of transactions and spamming the network and making it hard for people to use, right? And there was also conversation about dynamic block size with that. And, there was some conversations about how the stress test was done, which I thought was really interesting. He had made some algorithms in order to do this. And they got into some of the technicals behind that. So you go check out that presentation if you want to learn more. But one of the things that he commented on, which I thought was interesting, was that in the future, should the state want to attack Monero and make it difficult to use, then they're probably going to use algorithms like the one that he used, but link it with AI so that they can optimally disrupt the network and figure out the timing that best works so that the network can be disrupted to the most worst degree. Couple that with a lot of financing, obviously, by central banks and big companies that maybe have a financial interest in disrupting the Monero network. You could be talking about somewhat of a problem, but with stress tests like these, if you're able to improve, the nodes and the wallets and, adjust what you need to with dynamic blocks, then, you can kind of account for those things. I'm not the technical person to talk about this kind of stuff, as you all know, but between him and Arctic Mine, there was a good conversation about that, and I imagine more of these are going to happen. In fact, there was a spike in transactions, I think about a year ago, that kind of doubled the amount of transactions that occurred after his event. But some people thought that had to do with the Binance delisting, and that was like a bunch of transactions actually hitting the Monero network. Because when transactions are happening on centralized exchanges, they're not actually hitting the network. You just have movements in the centralized ledger that these exchanges have. And so it was thought at the time when the Binance delisting happened, which was, I think, last year, February, if I'm not mistaken, there was just a lot of transactions that hit the network. It may not have been a stress test type thing, but it was something like that. So, there was a similar kind of experience, and everybody thought, again, maybe is this a nation state attack? But who knows? Maybe it's this guy. I don't know. But he was the guy in 2020. I don't think he was, the guy after the fact. But okay. Another thing he noted in his presentation was the higher the XMR price goes, the more attention that is going to be had. So the higher likelihood there's going to be an attack, because the more powerful people are going to worry about the popularity of Monero, and the more incentive they'll have to disrupt it. But also the higher the cost of the attack. Right, so that's something worth noting. Spam attacks also de-anonymize to some degree. That's a hard word to say. De-anonymize to some degree because of the ring signatures, but I think that's going to be fixed to some degree with full chain membership proofs, because they fill up the rings, right, with the spam transactions, and then the real transactions have less transactions to hide in because the spam transactions belong to the same person, that kind of thing, right? So, and then Arctic Mind talked about how small attacks can be easy, but bigger attacks can be very expensive because of the dynamic block size expansion and the extra fees that you have to pay, right? And one thing that somebody noted was that when the nodes went down as a result of the spam attacks, and a lot of nodes just crashed as a result of the increased activity, there were a lot of people who actually flipped on their own nodes. And so that was an interesting social phenomenon that happened, where it's like if nodes go down as a result of an attack, then other nodes come online to try to pick up some of the slack. Now, there is something to be said for that, because there was a presentation on Eclipse Attacks, and honestly, I couldn't even tell you what an Eclipse attack was. That was one of the presentations that went way over my head. But I thought it was somewhat educational, like on an intuitive level, just to kind of get an idea as to how, these kinds of peer networks work in regards to crypto. I guess Monero and Bitcoin have very similar peer architectural structures, and they have interestingly similar peer-to-peer network dynamics. But they talked about supernodes. Apparently Monero has like 15 big supernodes that largely comprise the network, and they're the most trusted nodes. And an Eclipse attack would be like those nodes are taken out, and then malicious spy nodes quickly take their place, right? I think that is generally what an Eclipse attack is. Go check out that presentation. Yeah, go ahead and dig into that, take some notes, but I don't know how much worth they are. Arctic Mind, also, as always, has a great presentation. Because Monero has a private blockchain, one thing that I thought was interesting that makes it different from Bitcoin is that you can't censor transactions to try to limit the transaction volume on chain. You have to essentially price it out, because you can't discriminate one transaction from another, which basically means that in order to avoid spam, you have to price it out. And so that's why there is an adaptive block size with penalty, which makes it actually different from Bitcoin Cash, interestingly, which has a dynamic block size with no penalty. And the fee market therefore filters out spam, but also rewards miners for additional transactions or something like that. Sorry, I would have to watch that one again, but he's smart. He figured it out. There's like a lot of math in that presentation that went over my head. So let's just move on to the next one. There are atomic swap goals. There was another presentation on post-quantum anonymous transactions. This is from a guy from Neptune Cash. Probably the craziest presentation of the day, because the moment that guy started talking, way over my head, dude. He was like a a cryptographer mathematician guy, and by the time the presentation ended, I wanted to like look at other people and kind of giggle a little bit, like, hey, you get all that, but I think actually most of the people there got all that. Like, that's how out of my element I am. And people were competent enough to ask a bunch of questions about I gotta get about his presentation. And looking at Neptune Cash, I guess he's doing stuff where it's like zero knowledge. It doesn't rely on signatures, which is pretty interesting. So it's like private, scalable, quantum resistant. That's something he's working on. So that sounds pretty promising. Okay. Anything else I want to talk about? New developments with EdgeWallet. I want to talk about EdgeWallet a little bit because I do like Paul, cool guy, and he's doing good things over there at EdgeWallet. And apparently, Edge is going to support basic swap DEX DEX and then Sarai DEX as soon as that's ready. So that's pretty cool. And to work with decentralized exchanges within a wallet, and if they can make it pretty easy, I think that'd be great. They also have an interesting duress feature for their wallet. So let's say that somebody abducts you, you're in the middle of a wrench attack, and they want your crypto. Well, you can actually open your Edge wallet with another PIN that then puts a wallet that has like a very small amount of crypto as the main wallet. So they think you actually don't have that much crypto with you. And it's like you have two different pins. One's a pin to your main wallet, which has all of your crypto, and maybe not all of your crypto in a hot wallet, right? Maybe some cold storage, that'd be ideal. But also, you have a duress pin so that you can type that in, and presumably you already have that wallet ready before this happens, so that, should it happen, you have a good, distractor, decoy wallet that will hopefully appease whoever it is trying to take your stuff, right? So yeah, that's pretty cool. Signal support is coming. So I like what Paul and the EdgeWallet bros are doing over there. I had talked to them for quite a while at the conference. So anything else? All right, let's talk about NYM, because that is important. There's also like a Lightning Network coming to Monero, apparently. I watched some of the presentation. Once it started to get into the technicals, I obviously tuned out, but there is an idea to have a layer 2 payment channel network. I shouldn't call it a Lightning Network because Lightning Network is such an abysmal failure, but there's a lot of potential value with this, right? You could have, with these kinds of transaction payment networks, multiple low value transactions between two parties, right? And it's called Greece if you want to look it up. There's also the presentation on MoneroKon. And, it makes it so that gambling, not advocating for that, but gambling becomes a little bit easier. So instead of having to make consistent on-chain transactions when you're at the table or whatever it is you're doing, if you're going online or whatever, you just kind of open up a channel on the payment network and you just, keep a tab, right, on your balance. Same thing with just going to a bar, right? Instead of just doing transactions every time for a new beer and all these things, which, because of Monero's unique situation where it's like, you have to wait 20 minutes for your outputs to become available again, or your UTXOs to become available again. Like, it's difficult to actually make a lot of transactions in a short period of time unless you prepare ahead of time, by getting a bunch of sub addresses, sending like, a little bit of Monero to each of those sub addresses before you anticipate making a lot of payments. Whereas with this, you just make one payment to your payment network and then you can make all the payments you want in a short period of time. And that's really good for like bars and arcades and being at festivals. He had lined up the estimated value for these things. So gambling is $500 billion a year. Subscriptions, that's another thing. If you have recurring payments, over time to something, then, that's a $50 billion a year program. Bars, arcades, festivals, $1.5 trillion, microtransaction content. There's a lot of value in having, a workable layer 2 on Monero. So that's something that somebody's working on, which is pretty cool. Apparently it's going to be compatible with FCMP++. And I wrote down some other notes, but I can't really make sense of it now that I'm here looking at it, because it's like tech stuff. So go check out that presentation. So let's talk about now the NYM Mixet technology, which is one of the main things I wanted to see today. I didn't talk to Harry after the fact, nor did I ask him questions during the presentation, just because I figured people would have better questions than me. And that was true. And I learned a lot from y'all's questions. Thank you for asking those. But, I learned enough, I think, about this issue. And he did bring up a lot of things that I wanted to learn, namely the metadata problem. And one interesting thing that he said was that, there's another thing I have to write down that I learned after the fact from, I believe, Monero UK. Thank you for teaching me this, something about the Canary report, I think is what it's called, Canary Reporting. I'll go over that here in a sec. But I have to find my notes. Okay. So, Chainalysis obviously can't crack Monero. They never cracked Monero. They never were able to figure out amounts being spent. They can't figure out the amounts in your wallet. So essentially what they do now, according to Harry, is they go after metadata almost exclusively. And they try to link your metadata with your Monero activity. And apparently they can actually do this with some level of competency if you're not being careful. If you're not using like a VPN and you're just kind of doing everything on one IP address, your crypto activity, your messaging, your social media, and your other, like, they can actually kind of link some stuff, especially if you're using KYC. So that was pretty eye-opening. He went into some examples of that. They do metadata harvesting and traffic pattern analysis. And he said that it's a threat to the anonymity of Monero. And so this goes back to what I was saying in the prior two videos regarding the need to kind of be aware of this and be on top of this, right? Ideally, if you're working with crypto or private messages or anything financial related, this person had said that it's best to be as hardcore with your network anonymity as you can get. And he talked about NYM VPN, which is his product, and he made 3 examples of different VPN structures that are out there. Now, most VPNs, it's like you have your IP address, and then it goes to a server where it gets obfuscated, and then off it goes as like another IP. But that server can see everything that's going on with your IP address. It's just that other outsiders can't look in and see what's going on, but the VPN provider can. Now, a lot of these VPN providers say that they don't keep logs. We don't know if that's the case. Maybe you can trust that they don't keep logs because, like in Proton's case, as I said in the last video, there are court cases that say that they don't keep logs, and they've denied a lot of requests, and presumably that's because they didn't have the information to fulfill those requests from the governments. And there are privacy protections in Switzerland to a certain extent and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is, that's not the only protection that you can have, because if they are getting that information anyway, then let's say that somebody just breaks into, the HQ, turns on the logging, and then is able to get that information. Or maybe you have somebody who's able to surveil that activity, even if logs aren't happening. They keep their own set of logs, or maybe they just get raided by the feds, and then that information can be captured somehow. So, you just never know. It's happening. That is a reality, that your IP activity is being, picked up by these VPN companies. Now, it was commented that, the best thing that you can do is pay for, if you are going to use one of these VPN companies, to basically pay with Monero or Cash for one of these VPNs, so that it's not associated with your personal identifiable information. And then you do that if you're going to have any kind of VPN solution that is using a centralized server kind of thing. But where NYM comes in is it's a decentralized VPN, where it basically goes, like, one of the features is like fast mode, where it's like you have like multi-server routing. So it goes to one server, then it routes and it goes to another server, and then it goes, out, right? And so it does like packet mixing and stuff like that. I believe that for fast mode, which is like, okay, if you're just doing browsing and you're like doing things that don't really require a lot of protection, but you want kind of that protection anyway to prevent some metadata collection, then you have like two servers. Whereas if you're doing crypto activity or financial activity or messaging or social media or something like that, you're going to give up some speed and you're going to give up some efficiency in how you're doing things. There may be some lag and latency problems, but at that point with their decentralized VPN, you have like 5 servers that the signal goes through. So you get like a lot more protection. And he says that the 2-server decentralized VPN is more private than any other VPN option, even if you're using like Molovad or something like that. And you can get NYM with Monero, actually with the 50% discount. I'm not trying to advertise for them. They're not paying me. I'm just excited about this because of my recent revelations about the whole network privacy problem. And you can sign up. You get like a private key when you sign up. You don't need an email. You don't need a name. You get like an anonymous credential. And apparently the VPN costs money, but the Mixnet is free. So let's say a project or a wallet wants to integrate NYM, then they can actually integrate it for free, as far as I understand. And, they want to do that so that they can attract more people to the Mixnet. And the more people that there are, the higher the anonymity set and the more people that you can hide, among, basically, in regards to your activity. So that seems like a pretty good deal to me. And apparently Darkfi is going to be integrating this. And if Amir Taki is cool with NYM, I think that's a pretty good advertisement, because that guy is like a privacy guru in our space. And if he's saying that Darkfi is up to the task of integrating it, and it's up to that level, then I think it's a good thing, and I'm willing to go off that guy's word that it's something to look after. So there's also a token for NYM, but it doesn't have any value, and he kind of admitted it as such, but it will, because it's a reputation token, and the more that the Mixnet is used, the more value it's going to have. That's his hope anyway. And there was an interesting question about spy nodes coming onto the Mixnet, and he had said that as long as 20% of the nodes are honest, you can remain anonymous in anonymous mode. Now that's not a lot, 20%, right? So as long as 20% of the nodes aren't spy nodes, is basically what he's saying, that you could still remain anonymous. And when people spin up a node, apparently in this Mixnet, they have to sign some kind of legal agreement that says they're not going to keep logs on any of the activity, and they're not going to report any of the activity or something like that. And that's important, because if a government entity is going to be wanting to surveil this kind of network, and government entities are subject to the law, then they are going to have to follow the law that they consent, or they're going to have to follow the agreements that they consent to, should they want to have a node as part of the network. And that's kind of like a way to defend against any kind of spy nodes coming onto the network, which I thought was interesting. Who knows if they're going to follow the law, because there are these things called FISA warrants in the States, and should a FISA warrant come down upon any particular VPN, they're actually made so that they cannot tell you or any of the customers that they're backdooring the VPN, basically, and they're getting information from them. And so, are these governments going to follow the law? Who knows? But at least according to Harry, this makes it so that whatever evidence they do get can't be admissible evidence in a court of law because it was gathered illegally, I think is the case that he was making. So that's pretty interesting stuff. And I'm looking forward to looking into getting the VPN. Obviously, I've become a paranoid schizo about this whole network thing. So I think that I am going to look into this and, if anything, promote it just so people can get some eyes on it and check it out. But I think that's all I got to say about that. Oh, yeah, Canary Reporting. So one thing you want to look into, and this is news to me today, I just talked about this FISA thing. And I just said that you don't know if they are under a FISA warrant, right? Because they're not going to tell you. They can't tell you legally if they're under warrant. So what a lot of these VPNs do is they have like these canary reports. And a canary is basically something that was used in a coal mine so that, you know, if the canary is rung or something like that, then it lets people know that there is danger, right? And what VPNs will do is they'll release a report like once a month or intermittently that basically says, like, we have not been asked for, or we have not had a FISA warrant or something like that, right? And they do it like on a schedule. And so should they ever get a FISA warrant and they don't release one of those updates, then people can kind of know that they're under a FISA warrant without saying that they're under a FISA warrant, if that makes sense, because they're just not saying that they don't have a FISA warrant. That's not them saying that they have a FISA warrant, right? So that's like one of the interesting things that you can look up in regards to some of these VPNs to see if they're safe, right? If they don't have one of these canary reporting routines, then, you know, maybe you want to look out for them. So you can see why I'm so tired. It's been a long day having technical talks with people and, you know, learning these things and European coffee and just, gosh, man, it's been quite a ride. And really the best part, I think, of the event was just meeting the people, really, and just talking with fellow bros at the conference and connecting, you know, and just picking up on other people's lifestyles that they live, because you got a lot of interesting people who come to these events from all over the world, and it's a way for you to kind of experience life through other people, which is one of the great things about these international events, especially when you're talking about smart crypto people, because they tend to be pioneers in their own world. You know, you don't get into Monero and not have something about you which is kind of renegade and kind of against the grain. When you get into Monero, you're not a normal person. That's just the truth. Like, normal people don't get into this stuff. They don't look into all this stuff. They're just like, this is anti-NPC stuff is what I'm saying. And you run into a lot of really interesting thinkers, independent thinkers, and people who ultimately like finding the truth of things. And those kinds of people tend to live interesting lives, and it's always good to connect with them. So I think that's all I want to say for now. More videos to come on travels. I have some things I want to share with you all about kind of my experience being out here in Europe for a month. It's been really quite something. So that will come soon, but I'm to get to bed, figure out where I'm going tomorrow. I know I'm leaving Prague. Ideally, I find a church around here to go to, but after that, I'm going to probably head down south back towards Romania. And, you know, I'd like to spend some time in nature, ideally. You know, my kind of like phantasmagoria at the moment is trying to find like a cabin in the woods somewhere where I can just kind of chill and, you know, puff on a pipe and read some Dostoevsky for a couple of days, to tell you the truth. So maybe we'll make it happen. We'll smurf it up. So that's all I got to say, MoneroKon. Hope that you all are well. Hope that you enjoyed day 3 of the conference if you're still at MoneroKon. And glad to meet a lot of you. Have a great time. God bless. Talk to you soon.